So hey, I'm trying something a little bit different out here, at least different for me. Okay, it's not even really that different, but here I'm going to be talking about the film that I saw last in cinemas. But it's not exactly a review. I'll be talking about what made the film special, and just general discussion points, stuff like that. Be warned though, this is going to be super spoiler heavy. So most movies that revolve around science fiction, aliens, and anything else that's futuristic all end up resulting in kind of a similar way. They're all very heavily action-based, and they end up presenting a climactic shit show of exploding spaceships and lasers zapping. But Arrival is different. Rather than waiting in anticipation for an explosive climax, Arrival actually has you dreading one. Instead, the film remains mostly peaceful, with only warnings of conflict, and that is where most of the tension comes from. Arrival is slow, and most importantly, Arrival is intelligent. Arrival does a great job of portraying how complex something like language can be, even in forms of simple sentences, such as the specific example looked at, which was the question of, what is your purpose here? With a linguistic professor named Louise taking place as the central character, we get a detailed look on things such as this sentence and the structure of it. Louise breaks down this sentence into different parts, and explains that before the aliens can understand it as a whole, they must understand each different part of it. First, they must understand what the collective "your" in a sentence is, they must roughly understand the meaning of an intricate word like purpose, and most simply and most importantly, they must understand what a question is. Despite having a vastly different vocabulary though, it soon becomes clear that with context and much study, piecing together rough translations and basic words, the humans and these mysterious creatures can begin to understand each other. Through these rough translations in the film though, unfortunately at times words could get mixed up with others. A large portion of the film actually focuses on how easily a misunderstanding can happen, with a simple misuse of the word weapon in place for a more suitable word such as tool or apparatus. The aliens accidentally come up as threatening at one part in the film, and the people become scared. And so simple semantics can actually become quite a problem. Another small plot point of the film which I absolutely loved regarding communication was how the film showed the cultural differences concerning how other countries dealt with language. For instance, rather than using basic spoken language, the country of China chooses to teach the aliens communication through a game. Soon though, Louise explains that this can actually be pretty problematic, as teaching the aliens that the only form of human communication through a game suggests that any form of interaction can only end in one of two ways: victory or defeat. And this is a problem because it can create conflict. And I found this part particularly interesting because language obviously affects us all. If you're watching this right now, you know how to use words, I hope. However, once you actually think about it, different experiences can completely change the way you think about communicating. For instance, a person who is not taught any form of spoken language from birth will have a vastly different way of comprehending interaction. And so a person like this would obviously lead a very different life from you and I. And in a way, the aliens are like this to the humans in this movie. Something that Arrival excelled at was making this feel like a truly global event. It undeniably felt like a big deal despite having seen bigger and flashier things in other films before it. And I think that this was because it was believable. And one thing that assisted in this was showing the sheer scale of everything. This can most clearly be seen in this jaw-dropping scene which portrays the ship as the camera slowly hovers closer and closer towards it. This unbroken shot though then rotates to cut the ship out of vision and focuses on the people below. And the abundant comparison showing how minuscule they all are is just mind-blowing. There is no mistaking that within the film, this is a big event. Another part of the film which I found particularly interesting were the varying ways that the human race reacted to this. Some countries chose to lash out, and some, such as America where we spend most of the time, choose to discover, learn, and study what they can. And the thing about these different reactions though, is that though one of them is obviously much more preferable, they're all reasonably realistic. The people in the film are all reacting out of fear. And what I loved about this is that none of the people making these choices were evil, even if you thought that their decisions were wrong. Arrival portrays their idea of aliens in an original way, but what I particularly loved about the movie's approach to this was that it never felt like we as an audience were supposed to be shocked by this. We were never supposed to be like, what? Oh my god, aliens? It seemed like the film understood that alien movies have existed before. So instead of pretending that we don't know what's going on, it got right into the point. In fact, the actual arrival happened much earlier than I was expecting. And something that I particularly loved about the way that they were portrayed was that they were never supposed to be scary. The mysterious side of these aliens is held up throughout the entire film, and without fault they consistently just come off as ominous, and it had me thinking about their intelligence. The film never really states one way or the other how their intelligence compares to that of humans, but instead explains that their reality is just completely different to our own. And in this way it makes the comparison incompatible. They're so different. And I actually personally love that we never really got a good explanation of why the aliens came in the first place. Their reasoning for visiting was vague at best, with a brief line of, we might need you sometime later, I don't know, yeah, probably. And I think that not having a strong reason for the aliens to be there was a good and brave decision to go with. Made it so that the point wasn't why they came, but more so just that they were there and that this is how we might react to it. First, I'm just gonna straight up say, oh my god, those weren't flashbacks. What? We as an audience soon learn that the visions that we've been seeing brief glimpses of throughout the movie were not actually flashbacks like we so arrogantly assumed, but instead it actually flashed forwards to Louise's future. We learn that Louise's daughter didn't actually die in the past, but is actually yet to be born. But we also now know that Louise will have the knowledge of when and how her daughter will experience her untimely death. And she gets this knowledge because learning the aliens' language makes it so that you kind of rewire your brain and think more like the aliens. And the aliens experience time differently. They experience it in this sort of endless loop. Everything is kind of happening all at once rather than everything being linear. To put it simply, this basically just means that she can mentally time travel and see the future. And in perhaps the most science fiction-y part of the film, we can now see Arrival in a different light. It's truly one of those twists that you do not see coming at all, but there was enough to hint at it. If you ask me, Arrival has a twist done right, but I can understand why somebody might not like it. With this twist though comes another thing that might divide the viewer's opinions, as well as bring up discussion. And that revolves around the ambiguous suggestion of what Louise can now control, and what seeing one's future can mean. I've considered the different sides, at least from what I understand of them, and I'll try to explain them here. So one suggests that if Louise can see the future, this obliterates the possibility of free will. Instead, she simply always knows what is going to happen, but can't do anything about it. Although it might actually feel like she's in control, she never really is. In this version of the ending, everything always happens the same way because they're in a loop, and nothing can actually be changed. This would mean that somebody that possesses this knowledge, like Louise, holds no responsibility for what they do in a way. Instead, they simply become vehicles in their own lives. Man, this stuff is hard to explain. There's also the argument that if you can see your future though, well, this will just change it anyway, because with this knowledge will alter the future. This would make it so that you could only really see a possible future, which never even occurs. So it's really useless anyway. And you know what, I shouldn't have even brought it up, because the movie proves that this isn't the case anyway. So I guess that's not the answer. The other possibility and version of the ending that I like most though, is that Louise can in fact decide what she does, and so chooses to go through the necessary pains of life, even though some of these things can be avoided. I like this version of the ending because it suggests that life, all parts of it, is worth living. I like to think that Arrival's overall message is to appreciate what you have in your life and to live it. In the end, Arrival was a fantastic film. It was masterfully directed and it told an intellectually emotional story which I really appreciated. So let me know what you thought about the movie, let me know what you thought about my thoughts. And as I always say, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff. I always say it, blah blah blah. Alright, that's all. Get out of here.